Montana Territory, 1872. Dust swirled through the streets of Promise Creek, a frontier town caught between civilization and wilderness. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the weathered buildings, as Victor Harding adjusted his Stetson and surveyed the dusty main street with weary eyes. At 25, he'd seen enough of the frontier's cruelties to believe that a cowboy's life meant solitude, that love was a luxury men like him couldn't afford, not when survival demanded every ounce of vigilance. No sense in dreaming of hearth and home, he muttered to himself, a mantra repeated through 6 years of cattle drives, gunfights, and sleeping under stars that offered no comfort. The only promise worth keeping out here is to yourself. Victor had arrived in Promise Creek 2 days prior, having delivered a herd of cattle to the railroad junction 20 miles north. His companions had pressed on to Cheyenne, but something, perhaps exhaustion, perhaps intuition, had pulled him to linger in this unremarkable settlement. With enough money in his pocket for a week of lodging and meals, he decided to rest before determining his next destination. The Winchester rifle slung across his saddle and the Colt revolver at his hip were his only true companions. Not by choice, but by necessity. His father, a Texas rancher, had died defending their homestead from raiders when Victor was 17. His mother had succumbed to fever the following winter. Since then, he drifted from ranch to ranch, drive to drive, carrying little beyond his weapons, a change of clothes, and the conviction that attachment meant vulnerability. "You planning on standing there all day, Harding?" called Samuel Winters from the general store porch. "You're scaring off customers with that 1,000-yard stare." Victor nodded at the shopkeeper. "Just getting my bearings, Mr. Winters. Town seems unsettled today. Judge Bailey's due in on the afternoon stage. Brings out the curious and the concerned alike." Victor nodded again, though he had no interest in local affairs. He was passing through, as always. Tomorrow, or the next day, he'd move on. The pattern was familiar. Work, save, drift, repeat. The rhythm of a man who believed the frontier offered no permanence. Yet as he turned toward the saloon, the distant rumble of an approaching stagecoach caught his attention. The weekly connection to the outside world always stirred frontier towns, and despite himself, Victor paused to watch its arrival. The coach careened into the square in a cloud of dust, the driver hauling back on the reins with practiced expertise. When the dust settled, the door swung open. A young woman stepped down, her honey-blonde hair catching the sunlight beneath a modest bonnet. She wore a traveling dress of deep blue cotton, simple but well-tailored, with a white lace collar that accentuated her slender neck. She couldn't have been more than 22, Victor guessed, taking in her delicate features and the determined set of her jaw as she surveyed her surroundings. She turned, scanning the town square, and her eyes met his across the expanse of dust and destiny. In that single, suspended moment, something shifted in Victor's carefully constructed world. A peculiar sensation, like the ground tilting beneath his boots, forced him to steady himself against a hitching post. Her eyes, even at this distance, were clear and direct. Not afraid, not cowed by the rugged frontier surroundings, but assessing them with quiet determination. Then someone called her name, Miss Bethany Turner, and the spell broke as she turned toward the voice. Victor released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Absurd, he thought. Foolish reaction to a pretty face. But even as he turned away, heading for the saloon where he'd planned to while away the afternoon, he knew something fundamental had shifted. The whiskey tasted like dust in his mouth as he sat at a corner table, back to the wall, as was his habit. Through the grimy window, he could see the town square where the stagecoach had already departed, leaving the blonde stranger, Miss Turner, conversing with an older woman in front of the general store. "Heard you watching the stage arrival," remarked the bartender as he wiped down the counter. "Judge Bailey brings justice, or what passes for it, once a month." "Wasn't watching for the judge," Victor admitted before he could stop himself. The bartender grinned. Noticed our new schoolmarm, did you? Whole town's been talking about her arrival for weeks. Schoolhouse has been sitting empty since old Mrs. Finch took ill last winter. A schoolteacher." Victor took another drink. Of course, someone dedicated to civilization, to permanence. Everything he avoided. "Turner family used to have the largest spread north of here," the bartender continued. "Lost it all in '69 when the father died. Heard she's been teaching back east. Coming home, in a manner of speaking. Victor nodded absently, not wanting to encourage further conversation. Yet he found himself asking, "She's staying then?" Town council practically begged her to come. 20 children need schooling, and educated women willing to brave the territory aren't exactly common. The bartender eyed him curiously. "You sticking around, Cowboy?" "Just passing through," Victor answered automatically. "Always am." That evening, as Victor sat on the boarding house porch, the soft glow of sunset painting the crude frontier buildings in deceptive beauty, he found his gaze drawn repeatedly to the small cottage at the edge of town, the schoolteacher's residence. Lamplight spilled from its windows, a beacon of domesticity that seemed to mock his chosen isolation. The day's events took an unexpected turn the next morning when Victor's horse threw a shoe. The town's blacksmith, overwhelmed with work, couldn't address it until the following afternoon. "Frontier timing," Victor muttered, resigned to an additional day in Promise Creek. With time to kill and a restlessness he couldn't explain, he found himself walking past the schoolhouse where voices drifted through open windows. Children's laughter mixed with a gentle but firm feminine voice. Almost against his will, he paused, glimpsing Miss Turner through the window as she arranged books on shelves, several children helping eagerly. "Are you lost, sir?" The question startled him. He turned to find Miss Turner standing in the schoolhouse doorway, regarding him with polite inquiry. Up close, her eyes were the clear blue of mountain lakes, intelligent and direct. "No, ma'am," he answered, embarrassment heating his neck. "Just passing time while the blacksmith tends to my horse." "I see." Her smile was reserved, but not unfriendly. "You're the cowboy from the square yesterday." The fact that she remembered their brief eye contact made something twist unexpectedly in his chest. "Yes, ma'am." "Victor Harding." "Bethany Turner." She gestured to a stack of books beside the door. "Since you're passing time, perhaps you wouldn't mind carrying these inside?" The older boys who usually help are still finishing chores for their parents. Before he could formulate a reason to decline, Victor found himself nodding and lifting the stack of books. Inside, the schoolhouse was a single room with rows of simple desks, a larger desk at the front, and bookshelves along one wall. 3 children, none older than 10, were dusting and arranging slates. "Children, this is Mr. Harding. He's kindly offered to help us prepare for tomorrow's classes." Victor set the books on her desk, acutely aware of the children's curious stares and his own discomfort. He didn't belong in this ordered space, this shrine to civilization and future. "You're awful tall," remarked a small boy with a missing front tooth. "Taller than my pa, even." "Tommy," Miss Turner admonished gently, but her eyes held amusement. "Are you staying in Promise Creek, Mr. Harding?" asked a girl with braided pigtails. "No," he answered firmly. "Just passing through." "That's what all the cowboys say," the girl responded with surprising wisdom. "But Mr. Roberts said he was passing through 3 years ago, and now he's married to my aunt." Miss Turner rescued him from responding. "Children, please finish your tasks. Mr. Harding, would you mind placing those readers on the top shelf? I'm afraid I can't quite reach." As he arranged the books according to her instructions, Victor found himself drawn into conversation. Miss Turner spoke of her years teaching in Boston, of her decision to return to Montana Territory where she'd spent part of her childhood. "It must seem terribly primitive after city life," he remarked. "Different, certainly, but there's honesty in frontier life. In Boston, appearances often mask reality. Here, one faces truth daily, whether it's the weather, the distance to water, or the character of one's neighbors." Her eyes met his. "Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Harding?" Her perception unsettled him. "I don't stay in one place long enough to know my neighbors, Miss Turner." A deliberate choice, I imagine. Before he could respond to this uncomfortable insight, the schoolhouse door burst open. A man in a sheriff's badge entered, his expression grim. "Miss Turner, there's trouble. Stage was robbed 10 miles south. Driver's injured but made it to town. Says the Thornton gang is responsible." He noticed Victor. "You the cowboy passing through? Good with that sidearm." "When necessary," Victor answered cautiously. "I'm forming a posse. Could use men who can handle themselves." Miss Turner stepped forward. "Sheriff Davis, surely. No choice, Miss Turner." They took the payroll for the lumber camp. That's 3 months' wages for 30 men. Without it, half the families in this county won't make it through winter. The sheriff looked at Victor. "Well," Victor hesitated, his instinct for self-preservation warring with something else, something new and uncomfortable. The schoolteacher's eyes on him felt like a weight, a judgment, though her expression remained neutral. "I'll join," he heard himself say, the decision made before he'd consciously reached it. The sheriff nodded. "We ride in 20 minutes. Meet at the livery." After he departed, an awkward silence filled the schoolhouse. The children had grown quiet, watching the adults with solemn eyes. "You don't have to do this," Miss Turner said softly. "You're not obligated to this town." "I know." Victor reached for his hat. "But a man has to stand for something, even when he's just passing through." Something in her expression shifted. Respect, perhaps, or understanding. "Be careful, Mr. Harding. The Thorntons don't value life the way civilized men do. Neither does the frontier, ma'am." As he left the schoolhouse to collect his gear, Victor questioned his decision. Getting involved in local troubles contradicted every survival instinct he'd cultivated. Yet the thought of riding away, of seeing disappointment replace that glimmer of respect in Bethany Turner's eyes, seemed suddenly unthinkable. The posse, 8 men including Victor, rode hard through the afternoon, following a trail that wound into the foothills. Sheriff Davis was competent, Victor noted with relief, keeping the men disciplined and focused. By dusk, they'd tracked the Thornton gang to an abandoned mining camp nestled in a narrow valley. 6 of them, whispered Davis after scouting ahead. Heavily armed. "They've got a hostage, stagecoach passenger they took along." "Woman?" asked one of the posse members anxiously. "Man banker from Helena, by his clothes. They'll probably ransom him once they're clear." The sheriff outlined his plan. Surround the camp, call for surrender, and if refused, close in from all sides. Simple, direct, and dangerous. Victor was paired with a local rancher named Wilkes to approach from the northeast. As they moved into position under cover of darkness, Wilkes whispered, "Saw you talking with the new schoolmarm earlier. Pretty little thing." Victor made a non-committal sound. "Half the unmarried men in town are already planning to court her," Wilkes continued. "My money's on Thomas at the bank. Has a proper house and steady income." The thought of Bethany being courted by the town banker stirred an unexpected resentment in Victor. "Shouldn't we be focusing on not getting shot?" Wilkes chuckled softly. "Just making conversation. Besides, thinking about something worth living for keeps a man sharp when bullets start flying." Before Victor could process that philosophy, the sheriff's voice rang out, demanding the Thornton gang's surrender. The response was immediate, gunfire erupting from the cabin windows. What followed was chaos. Victor found himself pinned behind a boulder as bullets splintered the rock above his head. Across the clearing, he saw one of the posse members fall. The sheriff was shouting, trying to maintain control of the situation rapidly spiraling into disaster. A movement caught Victor's eye, the hostage breaking free in the confusion, running blindly toward the trees. Behind him, a gang member appeared in the cabin doorway, raising his rifle. Without hesitation, Victor stood and fired 3 rapid shots. The outlaw fell, but Victor's exposure cost him. He felt the searing heat of a bullet grazing his side before he could drop back to cover. "Harding's hit," someone shouted. "I'm fine," he called back, though the wound burned like fire. "The hostage?" "Safe," came the reply. The gunfight intensified, then suddenly ended when the sheriff managed to ignite the cabin's hay storage. Faced with a burning shelter, the remaining outlaws surrendered. By dawn, the posse was heading back to Promise Creek, 3 captured outlaws in tow, 2 dead left behind, and 1 escaped into the wilderness. Victor rode stiffly, the bandaged wound in his side pulsing with each movement of his horse. The local doctor had pronounced it a clean graze that would heal well if kept from infection, but it served as a sharp reminder of the frontier's dangers and why attachments were liabilities. If he'd been alone, he might have avoided the confrontation entirely. Yet something had changed. For the first time in years, he'd acted not just for survival, but for something larger, the welfare of a community. A community that included a schoolteacher with perceptive blue eyes who'd seen through his carefully maintained distance. Their return to Promise Creek was met with relief and celebration. The recovered payroll meant security for the lumber families, and the banker's rescue earned the posse the gratitude of influential people in Helena. Victor endured the backslapping and thanks with discomfort, eager to retreat to his room at the boarding house. As he stabled his horse, exhaustion washing over him, A familiar voice called his name. Bethany Turner approached, concern evident in her expression. "Mr. Harding, I heard you were wounded." "It's nothing serious," he assured her. "Barely a scratch." She didn't seem convinced. "Nevertheless, you risked your life for people you don't even know. That speaks to your character." Her words made him inexplicably uncomfortable. "Don't mistake necessity for nobility, Miss Turner. I was in the wrong place at the right time, that's all." "Is that truly what you believe?" She studied him with those discerning eyes. "That your actions have no meaning beyond necessity?" The question struck too close to beliefs he wasn't ready to examine. "I believe the frontier makes its own rules, ma'am. Today we won. Tomorrow might be different. And that's why you don't stay anywhere? Because tomorrow might be different." Victor stiffened. "You're very direct for a schoolteacher. Teaching requires honesty, Mr. Harding. Children sense falsehood immediately." Her expression softened, as do wounded souls. Before he could formulate a response to this uncomfortable insight, she continued, "The children are presenting a special program tomorrow afternoon to welcome me to the community. I would be honored if you would attend. My horse should be reshod by then. I'll likely be moving on." She nodded, disappointment flickering across her face. "Of course. Safe travels, then, Mr. Harding." As she walked away, Victor felt as though he'd failed some crucial test. Yet what alternative existed? Staying meant risking the inevitable. Loss, grief, the painful stripping away of whatever happiness he might temporarily find. Better to maintain the distance that had kept him alive these past years. That night, sleep eluded him. His side throbbed, but it was Bethany's words that truly kept him awake. Had he been running from life rather than embracing it? Was his solitude protection or punishment? Morning brought no clarity, only the realization that his horse wouldn't be ready until afternoon, after the school program would be finished. With resignation disguised as indifference, he informed his landlady he'd stay one more night. The schoolhouse was transformed when Victor reluctantly arrived that afternoon. Colorful paper chains decorated the windows, and the children, scrubbed clean and wearing their best clothes, sat in neat rows facing their parents and townspeople. He slipped in quietly, standing at the back as Miss Turner guided her pupils through recitations, songs, and a short play about the history of Montana Territory. Her genuine delight in their efforts was evident, her encouragement gentle but firm when nerves overcame young performers. "She's a natural with them," remarked an elderly woman beside Victor. "Been years since this town had a proper teacher. My grandchildren will finally learn their letters properly." Victor nodded, watching as Bethany helped a small girl overcome her shyness to recite a poem. The tenderness in her guidance, the patience in her smile. These were qualities the harsh frontier often stripped away, yet she maintained them without weakness. After the presentations, as the children served cookies and lemonade they prepared themselves, Bethany made her way to Victor's side. "You stayed," she observed, surprise and pleasure warming her voice. "My horse isn't ready yet," he explained, then added more honestly. "And I was curious about your program. The children did well. They worked very hard." She regarded him thoughtfully. "And your plans now?" "The same. Once my horse is ready, I'll move on." Before she could respond, commotion erupted at the schoolhouse door. Sheriff Davis entered, his expression grim. "Miss Turner, we've got trouble. Jed Thornton, the outlaw who escaped yesterday, he's in town, demanding we release his brothers, or he'll burn the place down." The parents immediately gathered their children, fear rippling through the room. Bethany's face paled, but she remained composed, helping organize the youngest children behind the older boys. "Where is he now?" Victor asked the sheriff. "Saloon, holding the bartender at gunpoint. Says he wants the prisoners brought there, or he starts shooting." Victor considered the situation. One man making these demands? Seems strange. He claims he's got men positioned around town. Could be bluffing, but we can't risk it. The sheriff looked at Victor. "You've faced them before. Any suggestions?" All eyes turned to him, including Bethany's, her expression a complex mixture of fear and faith that twisted something in his chest. In that moment, Victor realized the truth that had been building since their eyes first met across the dusty square. He cared what happened to this town. To her. "Get everyone away from the main street," he said finally. "I'll talk to him." "Victor," Bethany said, using his given name for the first time. "You don't have to do this. Some things a man has to do, even when he's just passing through." He echoed his words from the day before. Then, more quietly so only she could hear, sometimes especially when he's thinking of staying. Her eyes widened at the implication, but there was no time to explain further. Victor followed the sheriff out, their hurried discussion establishing a plan. Victor would enter the saloon while the sheriff positioned men to watch for Thornton's supposed accomplices. The main street was eerily empty as Victor approached the saloon, his hand resting near his revolver. Through the windows, he could see Thornton, a rangy man with a week's growth of beard and wild eyes, holding a shotgun on the terrified bartender. Victor pushed through the batwing doors, making enough noise to announce his presence without startling the outlaw into firing. "Thornton, let's talk." The man whirled, shotgun leveling at Victor's chest. "Who the hell are you?" "Name's Harding. I was with the posse yesterday." "Yeah? Then you know what I want. My brother's released, horses for all of us, and safe passage out of the territory." Victor kept his voice calm, reasonable. "That's not going to happen. Your brothers killed a stage driver. They'll hang for that. Then I start shooting people until the sheriff changes his mind." Spittle flew from Thornton's mouth, his desperation evident in his trembling hands. "Where are these men you claim to have positioned around town?" Victor asked, slowly moving further into the room. "Because I think you're alone, Thornton. Your gang is finished." Uncertainty flickered across the outlaw's face. "You calling me a liar?" "I'm saying you're desperate. And desperate men make mistakes." Victor inched closer. "Like coming back for brothers who'd leave you behind if positions were reversed. You don't know nothing about family loyalty." "I know about survival," Victor countered. "And this isn't survivable, Thornton. Not for you." The outlaw's eyes darted to the windows, perhaps looking for his non-existent backup. That momentary distraction was all Victor needed. He lunged forward, knocking the shotgun barrel upward as it discharged into the ceiling. They crashed into a table, Victor's wounded side screaming in protest as they grappled for control. Thornton fought with the desperation of a man facing the gallows, landing a solid blow to Victor's injured side that sent white-hot pain shooting through him. But Victor had years of hard living behind his lean strength. He slammed Thornton's wrist against the edge of the bar until the shotgun clattered to the floor, then delivered a punishing right hook that dropped the outlaw like a stone. As Sheriff Davis and his deputies rushed in, Victor leaned against the bar, breathing heavily, his side warm with fresh blood where the wound had reopened. "You all right, Harding?" the sheriff asked, securing Thornton with handcuffs. "I'll live," Victor managed, though the room swam alarmingly. "Get Doc Wilson," the sheriff ordered one of his men. Harding's reopened his wound. The next hours passed in a blur of pain and snippets of consciousness. Victor vaguely remembered being half-carried to the doctor's house, the sting of antiseptic, and the doctor's stern lecture about tearing open fresh wounds. When he finally fully awoke, night had fallen, and someone was sitting beside his bed. Bethany Turner looked up from her book as he stirred. "Welcome back," she said softly. "What are you doing here?" His voice was rough with thirst. She helped him drink from a glass of water before answering. "Taking my turn sitting with you." The doctor was concerned about fever. Her hand gently touched his forehead. "But you seem to be past the danger now." "How long?" "Just since this afternoon. It's not quite midnight." Victor tried to sit up, wincing as the movement pulled at his stitches. "You shouldn't be here. Not proper for an unmarried woman, too." "Mrs. Wilson is in the next room," she assured him. "And proprieties seem less important when someone risks his life for your town." He settled back, studying her in the lamplight. The concern in her expression stirred something long dormant within him. "Why did you do it?" she asked after a moment. "Confront Thornton alone?" "It needed doing." He paused, then added with honesty that surprised himself, "And I couldn't bear the thought of him bringing harm to this place. To you and those children." Her eyes searched his. "For a man who's just passing through, you've become remarkably invested in our welfare." "Seems that way," he admitted. "Before you confronted Thornton, you said something about thinking of staying." She spoke carefully, as if afraid of misinterpreting. "Did you mean that?" Victor looked away, the vulnerability of the moment almost unbearable. "I've spent years believing the frontier is no place for putting down roots. That attachment is a liability a man can't afford out here. And now I'm wondering if I've had it backward all this time." He met her gaze directly. If maybe surviving is different from living. The admission hung between them, fragile and profound. Bethany's hand found his atop the blanket, her touch gentle but sure. The children have been asking about you. Tommy is quite convinced you're some kind of hero from the dime novels his older brother reads. Victor chuckled despite his discomfort. Hardly that. I don't know. You've twice put yourself at risk for people you claimed not to care about. Her smile was soft in the lamplight. That seems rather heroic to me. Or foolish, he countered. Perhaps there's a fine line between the two. She stood, smoothing her skirts. I should let you rest. The doctor says you'll need to stay in bed for at least 2 more days. And my horse is being well cared for at the livery. She hesitated at the door. When you're recovered enough to leave. I hope you'll consider your options carefully, Mr. Harding. After she left, Victor stared at the ceiling, turning her words over in his mind. Options. For years, he'd seen only one path. The drifter's existence, taking work where he found it, avoiding entanglements that might bring pain. But now other possibilities flickered at the edges of his consciousness, like distant campfires promising warmth in the darkness. The next day brought visitors, the sheriff, several townsmen who'd been in the posse, and to his surprise, a delegation of children from the school, shepherded by Bethany. They brought a hand-drawn card signed by all the pupils and enough questions about his confrontation with Thornton to make Victor's head spin. That's enough questions, Bethany finally interceded. Mr. Harding needs rest to recover his strength. But Miss Turner, protested Tommy, we want to know if he's staying to be the town's protector. Victor caught Bethany's blush as she ushered the children out, leaving that question conspicuously unanswered. Later, when he was alone, the town banker Thomas Fuller arrived, his manner stiff and formal. Harding, the town council sent me to express our gratitude for your actions. No thanks necessary, Victor replied, instantly wary of the man's demeanor. Nevertheless, we've taken up a collection. Fuller placed an envelope on the bedside table. For your services and to compensate for your delayed travels. That's generous, but we've also had some discussion about the town's needs, Fuller continued, ignoring Victor's attempt to refuse the money. With the lumber operation expanding and new families arriving, we find ourselves in need of a deputy sheriff. Davis mentioned you handled yourself well during both confrontations with the Thorntons. Victor stared at him. Are you offering me a job? Merely conveying the council's interest, Fuller clarified, his expression revealing little. Though I feel compelled to add that Promise Creek values men of established reputation and stable character. The frontier attracts all manner, not all of whom are suitable for positions of responsibility. The implication was clear. Fuller was assessing him as both a potential deputy and a potential rival for Bethany's attention. Victor found himself unexpectedly amused by the banker's transparent concern. I appreciate the council's interest, he said neutrally. I'll consider it once I'm back on my feet. After Fuller left, Victor found himself seriously contemplating the offer. A deputy's position would mean stability, a purpose beyond mere survival. It would mean becoming part of the community. It would mean seeing Bethany regularly, watching her build her school, perhaps even. He stopped himself, the old fears rising to challenge these new possibilities. What if he accepted this life, only to lose it as he'd lost his family's ranch? What if he allowed himself to care for Bethany, only to watch her suffer the frontier's hardships? The wilderness had no mercy for weakness, no patience for tender feelings. Yet as he drifted into sleep, it was her face that filled his dreams, not with anxiety, but with a peace he'd forgotten could exist. By the third day, Victor was restless enough that the doctor allowed him to sit on the front porch for fresh air. From this vantage, he could see much of the town going about its business. Wagons delivering goods, children playing after school, women gathering at the general store. The ordinary rhythm of community life unfolded before him, a life he'd deliberately kept himself apart from for years. Planning your escape route? Sheriff Davis asked, settling into the chair beside him. Victor smiled faintly, contemplating my options. Fuller mentioned he spoke to you about the deputy position. Davis lit his pipe. He probably made it sound like the council's idea, but it was mine. Town needs a man who can handle himself. Someone the rougher elements will respect. I'm flattered, but I'm not sure I'm qualified. Davis snorted. You faced down the Thornton gang twice and lived to tell about it. That's qualification enough for most folks around here. And the fact that I've been drifting for years? No roots, no connections. Everyone out here is starting over in some way. the sheriff observed. The past matters less than what a man does with his future. He puffed thoughtfully on his pipe. Though I suspect there might be other considerations keeping you interested in Promise Creek. Victor didn't deny it. Miss Turner is remarkable. That she is. Been good for this town already, bringing culture and learning. Children respect her. Parents trust her. Davis gave him a sidelong glance. Fuller's been calling on her regular-like. Brings flowers every Wednesday. The information shouldn't have bothered Victor, but it did. She deserves stability. A good life. She deserves a man who sees her true worth, the sheriff countered. Not just a convenient frontier wife to serve supper and darn socks. Before Victor could respond to this insight, a commotion arose down the street. A wagon had overturned near the general store, spilling barrels across the road. Men rushed to help, and through the gathering crowd, Victor glimpsed Bethany assisting a woman who'd apparently been knocked down in the accident. Even at this distance, her compassion was evident. The gentle way she helped the woman to a bench, the efficient manner in which she organized the children to retrieve scattered goods. There was competence in her kindness, strength in her gentleness. Fuller's inside the bank, Davis remarked, following Victor's gaze. Probably hasn't even noticed the commotion. Victor made no comment, but the observation settled something within him. That evening, when Bethany came to check on his recovery as she had each day, he found himself watching her with new clarity. She noticed his scrutiny. Is something wrong? I've been offered the deputy position, he said without preamble. Her eyes widened. That's wonderful. Are you considering it? I am. He hesitated, then added, it would mean staying in Promise Creek, becoming part of the community. The town would be fortunate to have you. Her tone was carefully measured, revealing little of her personal feelings on the matter. And you, Miss Turner? Would you consider it fortunate if I stayed? A blush colored her cheeks, but she met his gaze directly. I believe I would, Mr. Harding. Very fortunate indeed. The admission, modest as it was, gave him courage. I've spent years believing attachment was dangerous out here. That caring for people, for a place, would only lead to loss. And now I'm beginning to think the real danger was in never allowing myself to care at all. He took a deep breath. I'd like to accept the deputy position, but before I do, I'd like to know if you would allow me to call on you. Properly. Her smile was radiant. I would welcome that, Victor. Even though I'm just a cowboy with nothing to offer but a deputy's salary and a reputation for trouble? You offer far more than that, she corrected gently. You offer integrity, courage, and the capacity to change when life presents new truths. When she left that evening, Victor felt a certainty he hadn't experienced in years. The frontier hadn't changed. It remained as beautiful and brutal as ever, but his understanding of how to live within it had transformed completely. 2 days later, strong enough to walk without assistance, Victor officially accepted the deputy position. Sheriff Davis handed him the badge with a knowing smile. Town's already talking about how you'll look escorting the schoolmarm to the harvest dance next month. Victor shook his head, amused by the frontier town's inevitable gossip, but not bothered by it. That afternoon, he moved his few possessions from the boarding house to the small cabin behind the sheriff's office that came with his new position. The space was modest but solid, a place where a man could build a life. As he arranged his belongings, a knock at the door revealed Bethany, holding a small potted plant. A housewarming gift, she explained. Every home needs something living and growing in it. Even a bachelor's cabin, he asked, inviting her in with a gesture. Especially then. She set the plant on the windowsill where light streamed in. Though I don't imagine you'll remain a bachelor indefinitely, now that you've decided to stay. The hint of teasing in her voice warmed him. Miss Turner, are you being presumptuous about my intentions? Perhaps. Her smile held no apology. But I've observed that when a man's eyes meet a woman's across a dusty town square, and something in both their worlds shifts fundamentally, well, certain conclusions might reasonably follow. Victor moved closer, emboldened by her directness. And what conclusions have you reached? That sometimes the frontier brings unexpected gifts. That perhaps two people can build something stronger together than either could alone. Her eyes held his, unwavering. That a man who believes himself merely passing through might discover he's actually finding his way home. In that moment, with sunlight streaming through the cabin windows and Bethany Turner looking at him with eyes that saw beyond his carefully constructed defenses, Victor recognized the truth. He had been drifting not because the frontier demanded it, but because he had been afraid to risk his heart again after so much loss. "You know," he said softly, "a man could spend his life searching for what I found the moment I saw you step down from that stagecoach." "And what's that?" "The courage to believe in possibilities again." When he kissed her, gently and with reverence, it felt like sealing a promise, not just to her, but to himself. A promise to embrace life rather than merely survive it, to build rather than drift, to love despite the frontier's hardships. By the following spring, Promise Creek had grown accustomed to seeing Deputy Harding escorting the schoolteacher to social functions, church services, and community gatherings. Their courtship, conducted with proper respect for her position and the community's expectations, nevertheless progressed with the certainty of two people who recognized in each other something essential and rare. On a perfect June morning, with wildflowers carpeting the surrounding hills, they were married in the schoolhouse where they had first truly spoken. The entire town attended, children sitting cross-legged at the front, their faces shining with excitement for their beloved teacher. Sheriff Davis stood as Victor's best man, and as the couple exchanged vows, he leaned over to whisper, "Not bad for a man who was just passing through." After the ceremony, as they greeted well-wishers, Thomas Fuller approached, his initial disapproval having mellowed to grudging acceptance. "Congratulations, Deputy. I trust you'll continue your excellent service to our community." "Count on it," Victor assured him, his arm securely around his new wife's waist. When they were finally alone that evening in the cabin Victor had expanded and improved during their courtship, Bethany touched the badge he still wore. "Deputy and husband, you've taken on significant responsibilities for a man who once avoided attachments." "The right attachments don't weigh a man down," he replied, drawing her close. "They give him purpose, strength, and love," she asked, her eyes reflecting the lamplight. "Most of all love," he affirmed, "though I never expected to find it in a dusty frontier town." "Sometimes," Bethany whispered against his lips, "the heart recognizes its future before the mind understands it's arrived." As night settled over Promise Creek, Victor Harding held his wife in the home they would share, surrounded by the community he had come to protect and value. The frontier remained what it had always been, beautiful, dangerous, unpredictable, but he no longer faced it alone, no longer believed that isolation was the price of survival. Instead, he had discovered that true strength came from connection, from love freely given and received, from the family they would build together in this small corner of the vast western wilderness. His future had begun the moment their eyes met across that dusty town square. He simply hadn't known it until now.